Quintin, awesome to have you on the show, man. Thanks for being here and excited for our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your background. I know martial arts, but then also the Marinovich system. Tell me a little bit about your background as a martial artist and then what drew you into that training system.
Yeah, okay. So I've been an MMA fan since the 90s. You know, my dad used to do like Gracie jiu-jitsu seminars with like Heus in them, like back in like 86 at El Camino Community College in Los Angeles. And he always like told me like, listen, like there's these grappling moves that you got to learn. Like, you know, he was showing me triangles and arm bars like in our living room. So I've always been kind of like hip to jiu-jitsu. I was kind of new about like martial arts. My dad was a martial artist too when he was kind of growing up. And he used to make me watch like old UFC fights on VHS with like Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie would fight for like 30 minutes and there'd be no winner. You know, I've been like a part of this sport since it's like early days. And I did that from 2010. I started training seriously, did a little competition, and I ran that pretty hard. So about 2018, 19. And so I kind of slowed down and started getting into coaching, getting into performance training for martial arts. And what got me hooked on it was throughout my martial arts journey, I kept coming across footage of BJ Penn doing this crazy training style with this guy named Marv Marinovich. And I was a big like strength and conditioning nerd because I had some weaknesses that, you know, I was really strong in certain areas, but I was really weak in other areas and didn't really understand why. You know, I got real big into kettlebells and battle ropes and, you know, listened to like Joe Rogan like crazy. And I was popping Alpha Brain every day. You know, I was part of that whole like early 20s millennial movement. And then yeah, I kept coming across Marv Marinovich's training methodology. I didn't know what it was, though. I was like, wow, this looks fascinating. And see BJ Penn just get better and better as he would do this training. And so that's when I was like, I got to do like more strength and conditioning. Like, this is how I'm going to win my next fight. And even to the point where I signed up to get my NASM certification, my NASM. And I did it so I could learn more strength conditioning methods. I wanted to learn this like nervous system training that BJ Penn was doing. So I bought the book, I studied, and as I was going through the book, I remember the first day I'm flipping through, I'm skipping all the pages trying to find nervous system training. Couldn't find anything that resembled it anywhere. You know, and I was like lost. I was like, what? Like, this is National Academy. Like, it says national. Like, this is big, right? This is the best they got. So I kind of like went through the certification process, got my cert, started doing personal training, started doing fitness and weight loss. And I was doing like MMA on the side for myself. And it wasn't until I started seeing Rafael dos Anjos started killing people in the UFC. Like out of nowhere, he started getting really good. And I was convinced this freaking Brazilian was on steroids. I remember me and my buddy, after Rafael won the belt from Anthony Pettis, we were like sitting in the car smoking a joint. And we're like, dude, this freaking Brazilian is on juice, man. How did he get this good this fast? Like, no way he got this good this fast. And then 2 weeks later, Nick Curson gets on the Joe Rogan Experience, starts talking about this Marinovich training method he's been doing with Rafael dos Anjos for the past couple of years. And I'm like, that's that training shit that I've been trying to find. And probably listened to that episode like maybe like 500 times over and over again, trying to learn the system, trying to train. I flew out to California to get certified by Nick Curson, learning like the muscular equilibrium testing, learning the ball work, learning the supercat. And finally, like got technically, I guess, certified, but got a stamp of approval by Nick Curson back in 2016 is when I officially like took on the training, and I haven't looked back since. It's kind of been my main like expertise, and the one thing in life I've been consistent with outside of martial arts is this nervous system training. And, you know, I kind of just landed here today with it.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. It does seem like of all sports, and I know Marv trained everybody and he was a football player. It's interesting to see how it seems like that system has landed the most with MMA and fighting. And maybe that's partly due to Nick, you know, or just maybe it's just the right place, right time with a certain trainer. As I've been through it, just from my experience, my experience was I got trained by Gary Marinovich just an afternoon, so just a day. And
okay.
I had seen all the videos and everything like that. Was really intrigued. But there is something about being with the person who's doing it, because I do think I'm more convinced over time that a really good trainer can take the same piece of equipment and make it come to life in a new way.
Mhm.
I had also read, Probot X, even back. I bought that book back when I was a senior in college. It's funny, I
Wow.
lent it to somebody and then it disappeared. And then I think I bought it again, I don't know, 3 years ago or something, just to kind of go back through it again. And the thing that actually I go to the most and have been looking through the most was whatever the advanced stuff is, all the partner work and that's the stuff that always intrigues me too. I'm sure we'll get into that once we talk about the resistance training. But the thing that was interesting is Gary ran it out of an MMA place in Santa Cruz. It was like a boxing MMA
Mhm.
studio. So it's interesting to me why that system has caught on to MMA so much more. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, I have a whole theory behind this. If you thought of it, I've freaking thought of it. It's like pretty deep. I do a lot of thinking on my spare time.
You listened 500 times to that thing.
Yeah.
Uh, that there was a lot going on there.
Yeah. Okay, so I believe the reason why it's so popular in MMA, well, I would probably say two main reasons. One, MMA has the highest amount of consequences for a loss in any sport, more than boxing, more than Muay Thai. You lose an MMA fight, you could suffer the same amount of damage as a really bad car accident, right? The stakes are really high. So results really matter, and fighters are very insecure, or they're very self-conscious with their training methodology, because to them, they know, like, if this doesn't go well, if I don't get the results I'm looking for, like, I'm going to get really hurt. Like, so that's always in the back of a fighter's mind, even if they don't admit it, is the point of imminent danger. So that creates a high demand for innovation, on top of a layer of holistic openness that the martial arts community has, just because the origins of martial arts, it comes from the East, it comes from Asia, well, at least the traditional sense that we're kind of used to seeing. And the second reason is MMA is the only sport where you can take a training system, or you can take a protocol or an approach, totally customize it at the world class level, and test it in real time. And that's what the fight is. And it's only two people in a fight. In a basketball game, there's so much room for variables. In football, there's room because there's a team, there's multiple athletes. The action isn't always happening your way. And the amount of dynamic qualities MMA requires. There's so much more demand on the body than, say, gymnastics, or say, like rugby. Even though they're both very hard demanding sports, MMA is just a little different because you need flexibility, you need speed, you need mobility, you need to be able to, critically think under damage. You need cardiovascular training. You need all these elements, say like American football, where maybe you need like 4 elements. In MMA, you need like 10, 10 like qualities you have to try to max out. So it kind of puts a lot of these training methodologies close to the magnifying glass. And you can see performance after performance after performance, so you get direct comparison over a timeline in an athlete's history, because the camera is just on them. In a football game, the camera's all over the place. You got like 22 guys out there, or 21 guys. Like, you can't track everyone's performance. And next thing you know, someone's hurt and you're not exactly sure why. You got to do a replay, and you don't know what their training camp is like. And there's 70 guys on a team, right? In MMA, it's just this one guy. So I think it creates a very similar sort of situation, say like how the Soviets approached their training, where it's very one-on-one, it's very customized, it's very individualized. And so I think that's part of the reason that, and some superstars did the training and had good results. That definitely helped. That's,
Yeah.
you know,
That's always the huge one,
yeah.
yes. But yeah, I agree with that. Everything else you're saying with like the very one-on-one ability of it, because people who have watched it, and actually before I even get too far, I'm just going to have you describe the system in a nutshell, because here we are talking about this system and we're kind of working off the insinuation that, hey, if you're watching this, maybe you've watched some Marinovich videos or Sports Science Lab or Power Plus, or, whatever iteration there is of that general type of methodology out there. Yeah, actually, why don't you just go ahead and explain, okay, what are the core pillars of the system that you would say define it, and then we can unpack a little bit more Yeah, just getting into that. I had some thoughts on the MMA and the one-on-one piece, but I'll save it if you want to get into unpacking the system.
Yeah. So I guess if we were to come up with like some key principles with this style of nervous system training, and it's called nervous system training just for context. Kind of like what, we'll kind of get into this with like the fascia and how, language is used, but the primary difference behind, say, this training methodology to your traditional strength and conditioning methodologies is that it prioritizes the development of soft qualities just as much as the development of hard qualities. And soft qualities is like your rhythm, your timing, your fluidity of movements, your speed, your reaction time, your coordination, on top of how much power you can develop. That's like a hard quality. Like your vertical jump is a hard quality test. Your broad jump is a hard quality test. Your max bench press, it's more like a hard quality test. But we don't have any technology to measure how fluid an athlete is moving, how quickly they can acquire new skills. We don't really know how to measure that. So it's kind of labeled in the context of talent. That's what we say. We say, oh, they're talented. That's a way we can kind of umbrella what we can't fully like understand, but we can all see it on the field. And so with this training philosophy, we focus on very key areas of the body to enhance these mechanisms that makes an athlete talented, in a nutshell, and like, foot strength and neurological drive, muscle elasticity, fluidity of movement. And some of these other words, like I've had to make up words like aerial recalibration, like your ability to re-coordinate your body in midair. We don't have a word for that in any strength and conditioning textbook. So there's a lot of things that the traditional system of strength and conditioning doesn't exactly know how to quantify and describe, and with this Marinovich style of training, like these are the areas we're trying to enhance in an athlete. And these are the priorities. We're not, of course, VO2 max testing, how high you can jump are important. But in my personal opinion, those don't really put points on the board, right? You look at Tom Brady, it's not his hard testing is what made him great. It's his soft qualities is what made him great. That's what I think wins games, and that's what we try to prioritize. We don't need you better at training. We need you better at your sport, better at the way you move, better at the way you acquire skills, and better at you execute those skills under pressure.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned like the hard and the soft side, because I think if you look at it as an umbrella with how do you label this stuff, even like the buzzwords like saying something's fascia training or saying something's nervous system training, you're going to get all this blowback, and it just becomes a big, as I'm sure, you've talked about that, because I think any of that stuff, I mean, for one, any training movement's going to, even a slow bodybuilding exercise is going to use the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Even the fascia is involved in some way, even in that, not as optimally as a, dynamic total body integrated movement. But I think we can always make, I don't know, like an argument why something is a bad or good descriptor. But I think just if you're trying to describe your training to the layperson, maybe that's where a lot of that stuff, it's like, well, what is this training all about? How is it different? Even interestingly, I'm trying to round out how I view movement and even understand movement and even describing it by getting back into art a little bit. I drew a lot when I was a kid. I wasn't that good, but I like drawing. And even just drawing this morning, honestly, it's funny. I was, to get started, I got a new sketchbook for drawing like the body and movement sequences. And I wanted to start it with muscles. And it's interesting. I was watching someone who does like, like superheroes or whatever. And it's like, well, here's how you draw like a lean superhero. And here's how you make them more bulky. And how you make them more bulky, you don't just make everything bigger. You actually make the muscle bellies bigger. But yet those dense connective tissue, like connections between joints they're somewhat similar. So it's like certain parts that increase in size. And as I'm drawing, I'm like, okay, well, what does this mean for function? What does this mean for how they would actually move on the field and reactive strength and all these things? And so it's almost like there's these archetypes that live in our heads. Like, oh, this is a muscular person. This person's more driven by this sinewy. When I took my USA track and field certification in like 2000, what was it, 6 or 7? They're like, it's sinewy. You're a sinewy if you're a good jumper. And that's what you would use to describe that thing. And so, yeah, there's always like words, right? But I mean, the system itself, it is, Yeah, I know. As far as I know, like the main differentiating factors of that system is instead of like maximal weights. I know Gary seemed to hate like anything barbell is like ugh. Like he he said he was telling me of a football player that came to see him because he was getting stiff and felt a little bit slower on the field just from too much. That pendulum had swung too far on traditional barbell training, and he told Gary, he's like, "Yeah, I squat 500 pounds." And Gary's like, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." I mean, I think some people could carry those max strength levels a lot better than others, but it's interesting what Gary's mentality was. But I mean, would you say that for people who haven't seen it, like the soft side of that tends to be encapsulated with things that have more balanced qualities, like squatting on like a disc, doing core activities on a ball, um, things that have like either a reactive, almost like a water base, like those water bells, right? Things that are whippy and reactive in general. If you had to kind of pin down some of the core pillars of that system in terms of how does resistance training get carried out, how does body weight training get carried out, how would you just pin those out just for people who might not be so familiar, and especially the big things you've taken up with it?
Yeah, well, a lot is context dependent on the athlete. This was one thing that Marv uh, borrowed, and you probably learned this working with Dr. Yesis back in the 80s, how you when you have an athlete, everyone has a genetic framework on how they move, how flexible they are, how much strength they naturally have, right? Some people are very stiff, some people are higher on type A compared to type B muscle fibers, some people are very flexible like the Diaz brothers. It's just genetic. So depending on what's going on, a lot of it's based on athletic assessment, and what you can observe as a coach will kind of determine how you develop training methodologies for that athlete. One of the primary principles that you keep seeing more and more with this training system, the more you look at it, is there's usually a level of reactivity to a lot of the training modalities. With the strength modalities, with the plyometric, the proprioceptive modalities. And that's probably, I would say, the big distinct difference from a visual standpoint when you're seeing a lot of these training is there's so much reactivity to everything. Everything is trying to influence the nervous system to become more reactive and to adjust to chaos, it's like proprioceptive qualities. So I would probably say that's like the big, you see with the ball work training, it's a ton of reactivity, ton of movement under proprioceptive tools. Like you said, with the balance disc, even doing strength under proprioceptive qualities is a big part of it too, with, reactive isometrics or reactive, even reactive maximal strength training is still in the program. That's another thing. A lot of people think that there's no maximal strength training. There absolutely is maximal strength training. It's just done with different tools. This is where like, I'm going to be honest, a lot of like strength and conditioning coaches get their panties in a bunch because they're like, where's your strength? Where's your power? Like, it's there. Like I said, it's just done differently. It's just like barbell does not equal maximal strength. Barbell is just a tool to try to achieve a neurological drive at maximal strength on the force velocity curve, if you want to get technical. But not a lot of people really think too deep into it. It's kind of like a monkey see, monkey do sort of industry. We're just like, oh, heavy, bar on the back. He's sweating. That was hard. I'm stronger now. It's kind of the logic that a lot of people kind of put into their training methodology, but there's so much more to it. But yeah, that's it kind of plays into, we were talking about that football player, when you're in the traditional system. Well, I shouldn't even say the traditional system. When you're using fitness tools, because let's be totally honest, these are fitness tools. They're not performance tools. We have taken fitness tools and we readapted them to try to fit the needs of athletes. When you go into different tools, now you can acquire different qualities when it comes to your strength, your speed, your force generation. And it totally gives you a whole new world of modalities you can start exploring. Because these kettlebells, these barbells, these dumbbells, they're very limited on what you can do as far as developing maximal strength, strength speed, or 1RMs. You're very limited. And in my opinion, I think these barbells are freaking dangerous, man. Like, I know way more athletes that get hurt in the weight room than they do on the field. Like, I even yesterday worked with a ex-football player. He blew out his QL, back squatting. Like with the barbell, like no one was looking after his different issues. No one was seeing if he had like asymmetrical dominance. Just doing the barbell squat overloaded the lower back because it is more of a lower back exercise than it's a leg exercise. Not a lot of people know that, and just freaking wrecked the lumbar. And you know, the lumbar spine is probably the most vulnerable area on the human body.
Athletic performance is built on a spectrum of training methods, from high velocity skills to power training to strength work. And on one end of that spectrum, on that strength end, you have the most targeted work in the form of machines. And this is part of the reason that so many top speed and strength coaches have their favorite machines to deliver that targeted stimulus. For decades, Hammer Strength has been a top provider of reliable, effective machines that are trusted by coaches and athletes worldwide. They fit seamlessly into that total performance program, delivering that targeted strength stimulus. When it comes to your machine-based strength training needs, think Hammer Strength. If you want a path to connect the dots of human performance, you can join over 1,000 coaches and athletes who have taken a Just Fly Sports online course. My 5-star review courses include the mini courses Speed ID, as well as Sprint Drills Reloaded. My full-length offerings that are CEU certified include Elastic Essentials and Sprint Acceleration Essentials. To learn more, you can head to justflysports.com/courses and take the next step to level up your human performance knowledge. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, it is. It's interesting to look at the tool set and the reactive component. So my thoughts on that going back to defining a system by reactivity. I really like that. I like very simple, like sliding scale definitions and how I create my own worldview.
Mhm.
And you think about, okay, well, who's barbell training the most successful with traditional strength and conditioning? And I think everybody achieves some level of success once you take whatever your basic movement qualities, your soft qualities you've gotten through childhood and hopefully growing up in a somewhat rich environment, some more than others for sure. And we all start from different points. But I think if you take someone who has great overall qualities, soft qualities, and you give them standard barbell training and it's decent, it's like fuel on the fire. But why is it? It's amplifying what they have.
Mhm.
But what if they don't have all that stuff? And I think to me, that's the big thing is where do you have the reactivity that you need to do the sport you do? And then hopefully we can give you a safe stimulus with the tool to enhance armor building and tissue resilience. And yeah, so that's how I look at it. But I do think, like you said, I love the soft side of things because I almost look at that's the thing that goes between all the cracks. Because the easiest thing is always that generalization. All right, we're going to max your motor unit recruitment or your tendon stiffness or whatever it is. And then hopefully all the soft stuff gets taken care of by the sport coach or
Right.
whatever physical education background you hopefully have, which is less and less these days. And, with that reactivity dial, I can see kind of to your point with the martial arts, like how important that is because, reactivity, like I think you can be a decent team sport athlete and be, if you have like a 1 through 10 reactive, like you could probably be like a 6 or 7 out of 10 reactive on the basketball court as long as you're like a great shooter, you make good decisions, you have good ball handling, you have good general physical capabilities and be pretty good. But that last little bit of reactivity that maybe it's like, what is it, Pareto's principle or the closer you get to awesome, it just is more costly and doesn't matter as much. But
Mhm.
martial artists, like, man, that 6 or 7 that would get you by on maybe some team sports isn't good enough anymore. And you have to actually be a little bit better and a little bit quicker. And especially that physical one-on-one where the perception is not what's happening on the field around me, where are the other players, it's just me and this person or this implement and pure reaction to whatever's going on in that space. I could see that there being even like the body weight thing, right? Too, because you can't just gain body weight and go up classes and down class. Like there's more consequences there as well,
Mhm.
which that's the thing that I always kind of had in my head with that one. But and I was going to say something about barbells and strength, but I kind of mentioned it already. I'd be curious what you think about, that piece as well. I mean, you mentioned it already with the reactive piece, but especially too, like I'm sure you work with lots of athletes. I see you work with a lot of young athletes, and I'm sure you see a broad spectrum of people who they come in, they move pretty good. Like I see that with youth sports. Wow, this kid moves pretty good. But then you then you get those kids that just don't have that raw movement ability. And what do we do with that? So I think that's a big piece of it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, training soft quality is really difficult. It requires a deeper level of thinking, a deeper level of understanding of, like, physiology and biomechanics. Like, look at the feet, for example, right? Like, most coaches, in my opinion, have no idea how strong the feet are or how to even train the feet. It doesn't even occur to them. It's not even like a thought. Like, I was working with a CSCS coach and he's like, "Oh yeah, the feet. Like, how come I never thought about the feet?" I'm like, "Because all that education is sent to a completely different department. It's sent to foot and ankle doctors." It doesn't it's not even in the paradigm of things that you should train. Or, like, look at grip strength, for example. Like, if you're working with a boxer or a combat sport athlete, your grip strength is a huge, huge multiplier for how much force you can generate through your punches. But it's like you don't really hear about this. You don't really think about this. You kind of just focus on the maximal strength side of things. And a lot of it, well, because it's been studied to death. There's that.
Yeah.
It's been studied forever. These barbell tools have been used forever. And the biggest problem is the philosophy of programming in this country, I would say in most of the modern world, is extremely inefficient to the point where I actually feel bad for college coaches. Where like this is a reason why no one thinks about soft quality is because when you're a coach, right, you got to go through studying, you got to go through grad school, you got to do all that your CSC, you got to do all this shit just so you can land a job that barely pays off your student loans or that barely pays off your rent, right? Or you got to learn how to sell and market. You got, like, you're a private contractor or something like that. You work in the private sector. And a lot of times to even make a decent living, you have to do generalized programming because it's usually like one or two coaches to 20 to 70 bodies. And you got an hour and a half to try to make everyone better. Like, that is like the worst model you could think of to try to make your athletes better, right? It's totally backwards. It's totally backwards. But that's the lens that everything is studied and applied through in modern sports performance. And that's a huge limiter because now you don't have time to try to figure out what's going on with the feet. You don't have time to figure out, okay, what's going on, like, with this person's imbalances, what are their shoulder blades looking like? You just don't have the time. So these ideas never get addressed and they never get studied. You know, they will in the physical therapy department, but the physical therapy department, you ever been to a physical therapy office? It's hell. It sucks. You got like 5 people to one physical therapist, and everyone's crammed in a clinic. The therapist is walking from one person to the other person back and forth. It's a very crazy, inefficient model when it comes to training people. The only model that actually gets it right, in my opinion, is personal training, one-on-one fitness. The one-on-one training sessions. It's always a one-on-one. It's always a one-on-one model. All the other ones, the sports performance model and the physical therapy model, it's usually a one coach to 5+ bodies. And I don't know if you train 5 people at a time, but you do not have the brain capacity or the time or the money to try to help them all the way they need the help.
Yeah. Yeah. Coaching different groups, it teaches you something not just about group logistics, but I think about the nuts and bolts of training itself. Because when I started, I almost went backwards in some sense. I started with being a track coach where I did a lot of small group work, like either a lot of times it was 2-on-2 or 1-on-2 athletes or even 3 athletes, and sometimes even 1-on-1. And so I got very, very well versed to those types of coaching cues and how do I help an athlete in this system. And then I get into it's me and 30 athletes. Or what the worst situation I ever found myself in, inexperienced, but I learned from this was I had literally like 35 distance runners. And this was the time where I was probably more, and I'll slide the scale. I'll use barbells more for athletes who need armor and those qualities. But this was distance runners. And these were athletes who did not need what I was currently applying. I had them doing probably 30 years old here and, giving them like barbell deadlifts as a prescription. I think from the floor of the blocks. I don't know why. And it was just the worst. It was the worst like nightmare you can imagine. Like rounded back city. And again, I resonate with people who do, Jefferson deadlifts and things to get spinal segmentation or load. I think that's great. I don't think that's great if that's the way you learn deadlift when you're supposed to be doing a regular deadlift. And I just did not set it up well. I got our strength coaches running, to help and help me with that side. But just that side taught me a lot about, hey, you know what? If I got this many people, we're going to be doing, and it's this group, we're going to be doing ISO lunges, even ISO wall, the most simple stuff. It's going to be iterations of the most simple stuff. And even now I look at too, how do the groups mirror the person next to you? How do they mirror you? And then how do the younger athletes mirror the older athletes, and setting that up and like using that is okay. Well, if we have a big group, this is the system, but then all the way down to that one-on-one. Yeah. Spending time with Gary, Gary coached every set one-on-one, he would be like, all right, slow reps, quarter reps, full range. And then it's like an art form where he's guiding it as you're going along, and he sees when the quality drops and he knows, all right, let's end the set now. And just a totally different mentality. But I think it would benefit all coaches to really work with that, the fullness of that spectrum, because I think, like you said, I think a lot of times a coach who comes up in mainline strength and conditioning, and here's the group, we almost coach to that full group, but then when it becomes a smaller scale session, there's nothing that's really thought to add in to make this a little more reactive. Like you said, the reactivity, the aliveness. Again, it can happen in group too, group games and things like that, for sure. But in terms of strength and those athletic qualities, I think that there's so much that can happen when you pare down into that just small group setting that can be, adding that reactivity and aliveness to it.
Yeah. Yeah. As quantity of athletes in your training session go down, the quality of the training can increase. And experimentation can start taking place. You can try some new things. You can see how this person reacts to it. But when you got and another thing a lot of people don't think about, I'm also trying to drive this point home like crazy for a lot of younger coaches, is that a lot of people probably can't even make a living on one-on-ones. Not a lot of parents are going to want to dish out like $300 every 2 to 3 sessions. Like the proportion of how much it costs for your time to try to make a living in comparison to how long it takes for the body to adapt to said stimulus. It's really, so you have to kind of create these groups just so you can pay your gym rent, right? Just so you can pull in like $3,000 to $5,000 a month. So you got all these factors that are kind of compounding on top of each other, which when you think about all of them, not just about what are the textbooks saying, but you think about what's the reality in the trenches of being a performance trainer, it really starts to explain itself why the state of sports performance is the way it is. This is why we are so maximal dominant, barbell dominant, because it's doable. It's doable for what the market allows to work.
Yeah. Logistically, it's definitely the easiest. I will say too, even looking at like some of the machines, like super cats are awesome. I wish I had one like in my basement. I look at like the sports science lab machines and things, and just logistically, it's so much easier just to have the tool.
Yeah, you can always get a barbell anywhere. Getting a super cat or an isokinetic accelerator, that's no easy task.
No. And I think that's just part of the art of it too, though. It's like, okay, if you know what you're doing with barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, you can deliver a phenomenal stimulus. But the problem is you give that set of tools, that's the standard set. And you have people with very limited experience or the way they view the process. It is easy to rack up dings and little injuries and things like that. I think there's ways you can make it a lot safer, like front loading all the barbell stuff instead of back squat to go Zerchers, or I look at even Jay Schrader's system. I was going to ask you some of Jay type questions. I saw he used like Zerchers a lot. I used to wonder why they use Zerchers so much. And I love Zerchers. It's an awesome stimulus. But yeah, if the super cats, all that was ubiquitous, like all over the place. Like what an awesome tool, or even, it's funny how even the Pilates like reformer kind of got taken over for some of that stuff. Funny enough, I have a master's track athlete who I took on who had been struggling with a lot of like Achilles and lower leg stuff. And he was showing me all his setup and all this stuff. And I saw he had a reformer and I was like, all right, here we go. Like, reformer jumps and stuff. And that was straight from watching like I don't know how Marv got into that just because such a like a big, strong dude. It's like this, but that's such artistry to be able to take something that was probably the realm of a very soft system. How can we make this a performance output tool?
Mhm.
And I just think that's such a cool part of this whole thing is finding these more soft origin tools and actually putting a little more hard stimuli into them. Like, and you kind of get this cool blend. It's like a cool paintbrush.
Yeah. I think he actually got the idea of using the Pilates from Dr. Edith, I believe.
Mm,
I think
yeah.
because before Dr. Edith, like all the ball work and balance pipe training, not a lot of people know, like Marv didn't develop any of that. That was all Dr. Edith's
Yeah. Yeah.
creation, with Rev 6 or Rev 9. I can't remember what her IG is.
Yeah. Rev 6, I
Yeah,
think.
Rev
Yeah.
6, and Marv was just working with the Dunk Master, working the Super K and like the plyometric system. A lot of the Todd Marinovich style of training. If you look at old '80s footage
Yeah.
with Marv and Todd, but yeah, Dr. Edith. I think everyone says Marv's a genius. I think Dr. Edith really revolutionized the system more than Marv. If I'm going to be totally honest, she basically developed the soft quality application in the nervous system training. And that with their creation of Probot X that they co-authored together. The Pilates system. She was big into Pilates, but yeah, I think that's how it all kind of like came together. It's all kind of fused together in one cohesion system.
Yeah. You mentioned the feet too, and reactivity. And I think about with Edith's work, a lot like the slant board, barefoot slant board type stuff, the discs as well. And I don't know, where I think Edith may have been a pioneer with that. I've seen that in her work as well. But again, how do you take something that's like that originally soft and then you're putting more athleticism onto it? But a lot of times when we think train the feet, at least modern S&C, a lot of times it's very top down, such as even like doing an isometric ankle hole with your shoe on. You don't have the reactivity. I mean, I think it's still good. I think you still get good adaptations in the lower leg and stuff, but you don't get quite the reactivity that starts from the sensory of the foot and then goes upwards.
Mhm.
It's still kind of things pressing into the foot from the top down. And that's the thing that strikes me with the reactivity piece. Like things that are just, barefoot and slant boards and all sorts of different angles and hops and the discs, because you have to find, I look at it as, I wish almost people would rebrand with those discs, like balance discs and weight, just to call it reactive foot training and not balance training, because I think, again, with all things, nervous system, fascia, balance, it gets a bad name really quickly for,
Mhm.
you could say marketing reasons or whatever, but like, I look at it like a good balance setup forces the foot to react fast, find that point, that lock, on the transverse arch, and then that shoots up in the system. It's like, this is why that feels good the next day. This is why I feel bouncier the next day. It's not because like I was like surfing and had to like wobble around or something on a totally unstable surface. Like you said, it's really reactive. And I think that's the thing that innately feels good with that stuff. Like that's why athletes say, right? Like I did this system and I just feel good the day after. Like I don't feel sore. I feel reactive. I feel explosive. And I think regular weight, you can adapt to anything. You can adapt to regular barbells and eventually, you feel good the next day. But I don't think it's in the way that you do with the reactive work, and
Mhm. Well, to kind of go to your point where they talk about like top down training. So that's kind of how I think there's a couple reasons for this. One, I think there's a bit of a subconscious layer when it comes to perspectives on how you view the body. Well, for one, the feet are hidden from everyone. They're covered in shoes, they're covered in socks. They have like weird connotations. Like I used to like a lot of coaches used to say I have a foot fetish. Like there's a lot of weird sort of cultural barriers just to get people to take their goddamn shoes off. I remember when I first started working with regular athletes, I got my first job as a sports performance instructor, and I was bringing in the nervous system training to their program, and all the kids were freaking out that they got to take their shoes and socks off. They're like, "Oh, like we're like really ew, like eh." We have this weird issue with our feet. I think the other layer is because okay, so have you ever been asked to do a movement and you're like, shit, this one's going to kill me. I just know I'm not going to be good at this. Like your nervous system can feel that it's weak in this area that we're about to hit, right? And you never thought about it. It's like your nervous system has this built in information that gives you like these emotional impulses. They're like, okay, you ready to try? It's like, oh man, this one's going to suck. I can just tell. Even though you've never done the movement before. I think we all have this weird subconscious layer that messes with our thinking when it comes to our feet because we all have weak feet. Just about 99% of all modern people have weak ass feet. So they shy away from their weakness. They don't really want to look at it. They don't really want to think about it too much. You know what I mean? There's like, I know I'm kind of like, some people may say I'm reaching, but I really believe there's something there when it comes to like the feet. Now in the martial arts community, it's a little less, there's a little less resistance because we're naturally always barefoot in our training, and we physical contact with jiu-jitsu, we sweat on each other. We're a little bit less self-conscious about like, being close with our bodies or with other bodies. So it was a way easier for me to get martial artists to start training their feet. But with just regular people, man, you don't really want to think about it. You don't like the feet. The feet are gross. The feet are dirty. Sports performance coaches, all they do is worry about ankle sprains. I had so many coaches asking me like how, like, aren't you worried about ankle sprains when you're doing the balance pipes or the slant board? And I'm like, no, dude, your feet or your ankle is a strong joint. Like your feet are designed to take abuse. You should see people in indigenous countries, you look at their feet are haggard and thick and big and like meaty, right? Your feet are designed to take a lot of punishment, but we have this weird idea that feet are fragile. Ankles are fragile. They sprain, they break. You can't train them too hard. You got to put it on a Bosu ball or a foam pad. That's how you're supposed to do it because it's safe. There's this weird paradigm that people are stuck in thinking that the feet are a very vulnerable spot. And I think that at the core of it is the reason why we look at things from the hips down instead of looking at things from the feet up. And it goes all the way to the top, even to our leading researchers. Because I don't hear no one at universities talking about foot strength. I ain't heard it. You hear about it? It ain't even being thought about. They think about the feet a little bit. But you still see them like doing like weird, like, soft surface modalities and socks, no hard surface tools. Even though we have scientific evidence knowing how much the feet control the nervous system. So I think, that's what I've been able to, that's why I think it's going on. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, there's been more good research that's starting to come out, like, kind of like where the more, I guess more traditional start to mean more of the soft qualities, but even making the soft qualities, just giving them a number, because I think that's helpful for people. But I've seen like Romain Tourillon has been on this podcast maybe like 15 episodes ago. He's doing awesome research on like forefoot strength, toe strength, doing a lot of work, the work and modalities bottom up, and then seeing how that changes a variety of outcomes. So be it COD, sprint speed, jumping, and it's not all the same. It doesn't hit everyone the same way. Like some qualities actually improve more or less than others. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's starting, once the research hits and it's there, I think it's a lot easier for it to be mutually accepted by the traditional community, seeking those data points. And I think those are good. Honestly, it's good for me to see those. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you studied that and put that data point out there. Cause oh yeah, I can see why a change of direction is so influenced by the way the toes can actually bend against the ground when you twist and turn. And that's awesome. Like now I see that connection. But that wasn't happening 10 years ago at all. I mean, but that's why Marv's stuff was so ahead of its time. And even still, I still appreciate the reactive qualities. And I see the work you do, like the little slant boards. Like, I love just how basic those little slant boards you have are. Mm-hmm. Like, didn't have this as a question, but I was like, how do you make those just like two pieces of wood, like bent together, and you just stand and just do different activities on them? How awesome. Like, so I think it's getting there, but it's getting there through more, okay, here's some data, here's the protocol. But I mean, Marv's been doing the art of it, and Edith and Gavin and Sports Science Lab and all those, that cast has been doing the art of it for decades now, and it's just once the research comes out, I think that spearhead helps it to become more common. But yeah, I'd be curious. Tell me, how did you make those little slant board things? That was like awesome. I need some of those.
Yeah, I mean, really just buying just scrap wood from Home Depot, and like I made my first set of slant boards. I just used like homemade materials from Home Depot, a bunch of pole sanders, like the sandpaper you put on those when you're doing like a paint job. Just liquid nail it onto a piece of wood, just take take a 2x4, cut it by 12, take a 2x4, take a 4x6, cut it by 4, just screw them together, glue some sandpaper on it, like $20 slant board, freaking change your life. Same with the PVC pipes. They come pre-cut at Home Depot, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And let me ask you this, Joel, because you got me thinking about something. That it's cool that these data points can come out and it can really like get us to think about, okay, maybe there is some legitimacy here. Here's where I get stuck. What happened to just scientific logic and common sense? Like when you look at the foot and how it interacts with the ball of foot to the ankle to the knee, right? You can even move your toes and you can see the tibial muscles move and the knee react to it. How come people can't just logically put this together? Why do they need a study to be like, oh, okay, yes, let's implement it for the University of Michigan soccer team now that there's been a study? Like, this is what drives me crazy is the lack of common sense, where if you see something, you can observe it, you can understand, okay, biomechanically, all animals function from the ground up. It's a biological law. But for some reason, we can't take that logic and transfer it over and just start innovating until there's some sort of number put onto it. That's what I never understood.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot there. You always have to zoom out and look at the culture, by and large. And I think that, the scientific method and true peer reviewed research is such a cornerstone. But the question is, of course, does science get hijacked, or where's the role of human intuition play with all this? So I think there's always that, eventually you want that backing, and maybe it's always going to be like that. You're always going to have the pioneers who are a few decades ahead, and then eventually something gets studied and you feel safe. Okay, I don't look like a kook in my weight room doing this stuff because this study said this is good. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that. And I do think it's easy to I hate to I think the Dunning-Kruger idea gets thrown out overused, right? Because you think you're the master, maybe you think you're the master of the foot because you saw X, Y, and Z, and you just when in reality, I do think there's a lot of deeper layers, and even to the point of, because we live in a world where you can watch a video and we think we're master very quickly, and I think there is the importance of having a well-rounded, balanced program that at least a good portion of it you could point to some studies and say, yeah, this is the trail I'm headed on. This is why I'm doing this. But true innovation does sit ahead always, and I don't think we're all meant to be innovators in that way. Like the whole world isn't meant to be Leonardo da Vinci. It just, there's people who innovate, there's people who take the innovation and the mainline it, and then there's also people who are constantly changing things. And I think we all kind of sit in a unique realm. But I think regardless of who you are, I do think we lose the art and importance of just observation, like movement observation, like just to sit and just watch movement. And it's funny, I wasn't good at it when I started as a track athlete. I remember watching other track athletes, and their teammates or their coaches would say something to them instruction wise. Oh, do this with your leg or whatever. And I was clueless. I was actually thinking, why are you saying that? Because I was just, if I high jumped, it was just athleticism. It was just from a history of jumping up staircases and trying to dunk and do different dunks and jumps and sprints and playing sports and trying to do ninja kicks when I was a kid and being obsessed with karate, even though I didn't actually do it. And it was just the amalgamation of all those qualities into high jump. And I was almost unconscious as to all the little X's and O's. And so it was just a very just instinctual. And then slowly just being a track coach and being around track coaches year over year over year over year. And then, I would say my observing muscle grew over time. It did not come naturally. But then you get in the weight room and I do see it. I think a lot of times, a lot of strength practitioners are much more about, okay, this is the protocol, it does this. And maybe the research says it, or maybe we've just accepted it does this. But then like all the soft pieces, the movement within that, I think that's the thing that we just neglect. And I don't think it's because of research. I think it's just because we don't. I even look at it like observing nature. Like I think we used to live in a lot more slower time where things, just to sit and observe things, came more naturally. I don't think that's as accessible now as it used to be. And so my thought is just regardless of what your predisposition is, I think the world needs a few people who are a little more skeptical because we need those people as a counterbalance too. But I think regardless, I think we could all do better by just spending more time, observing. And I'll say too, I'm not even like at the magical place of that. Like it was funny, I was just watching a video of you talk about the feet. It was a high jumper, Australian guy, Brandon Stark. If people have seen his videos, he's just like a human bouncing stick. Like literally, it's like you drop the stick on the ground, it just goes ping,
Right,
ping,
right.
ping.
Okay.
And he's doing barefoot stuff. His feet are really interesting because his toes just crank in a dorsiflexion way more than the bell curve. And then there's this muscle on the medial side of his foot that's really pronounced, like way beyond what people would. But you look at how this guy moves and operates in his body in context of the jump, and you could see why that's so developed. But I don't think I would have noticed that 10 years ago. It's just taken a lot of time and observation. And then you observe that and you think, okay, well, what qualities do we need to back this with in the gym? Where do you make your money in your sport? And so, yeah, I think it just goes back to observation and just being even if it's not your bread and butter, like just to have some practice where you spend time observing and not just what someone told you to observe. Because that's usually, it's like, hey, go look at this part. Like even the way people learn sprinting, it's, well, you should look at this and this and this. And I guess that's where we all start. But I think eventually how we observe does become an art where we start to look almost between the cracks, and there's different ways we scan and observe movement for. Yeah, like I'm sure the way you observe it in MMA is different than, like, if I observe MMA, I would be like, I don't know what to see. I don't know what to look for here. Quintin, tell me what to look for. Why is this guy good? Like it's almost like context dependent too. So I'm sure, yeah. And you mentioned your dad. I was going to say, with your dad making you watch all this stuff, it reminds me of Seth Lind's pitching doctor. He's been on the show a few times. His dad had him doing like slow motion pitching and observing Nolan Ryan very early. And I just think about how that all settles in the system. I didn't have that at all, by the way. I was way behind on that stuff.
Yeah, I think what you said actually kind of really rings. I think this is the truth to it. I think a lot. I think the sports performance community are not being trained on how to be sports scientists anymore, just coaches. And I think that's where we're not getting enough paradigm shifts happening for a lot of coaches. Like you said, it starts with observation. Like we all learn this in like 5th grade. We start doing like little the scientific method. You get your little packet and you cut onions and stuff like that. And a lot of us, for some reason, like after we don't have a culture that pushes for us to be scientists again. And a lot of it, honestly, I think a lot of it's just out of fear. Because if you try, dude, I get so much shit on my social media for trying different experimentations, for trying to do different ideas. And I talk about my ideas. And dude, there's at least 5 people in the comments say how much I'm a grifter and I'm a snake oil salesman. I'm full of shit just from trying to do experiments. And if you're like, luckily, like after a while, you kind of become immune to it. You're kind of like, all right, whatever. Like this guy with a Winnie the Pooh profile picture is talking shit about me again. Like whatever, he's got a Winnie the Pooh picture. But if you're like a smaller, less popular coach, maybe you got a smaller business, you're still trying to learn. I could see how that could really deter a lot of people from wanting to put new ideas out there just because the amount of criticism you get on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting world we live in, especially where people who would never say something to your face in person, well, especially you as a martial artist, will say it over, miles away. It changes your brain and how you perceive discourse. And that's why I actually I don't talk about social media that much on the show, but even the videos I'm proud of, I think are good, will get negative comments, and I just ignore them just because it's not worth it. It's not a real conversation in some respects, depending on what you're looking for. It can be, but for a lot of people, they aren't treating it as a real conversation that they would face to face, and in that sense, it's just not the same thing. But to your point with experimentation, yeah, funny enough, I've been on a little Leonardo da Vinci kick, and I asked AI, like, how would you approach sports science and performance with, oh, yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, hopefully people see the video there. The video is included with the tattoo. I love it. But I asked AI how would a sports performance coach approach human performance if they were Leonardo, or how would you take a Leonardo mentality? And one of the things was have mini experiments you're constantly running. You're constantly running some sort of mini experiment. And maybe the only thing I think with that, and I absolutely agree with you, Quinn. Like, I think we should run experiments more often in a variety, and not just like, for me, it's easiest to run feeling-based movement experiments, but things that also are backed by data in the sense of at least some sort of metrics and some sort of outputs and numbers or wattages, I think are also important. Like you want to measure, because I think you can get lost in how things feel, or you can get lost in data points. You want to always have the circle running that's going between all of them. So you're constantly, okay, this felt good, this worked good. Okay, now did the data match it? Did my jump, my sprint, my movement on the court, or whatever you're doing match it? Okay, good. We're onto something here. So I think that's, I just think that's something I think everyone can do. But I think the question then is, we live in this world of social media and intellectual property, or our own, the way our experiments work itself into an audience funnel or whatever it is, if that's our goal. And well, the question is, well, how long do you run the thing before you put it out there and say, hey, this is, I think, and maybe it's how it's framed, this is the ultimate training, or, hey, I'm trying this. Maybe you should, just so you know, I'm trying this. It just depends on, I think, how it's framed as well. And there's always different amounts of time we let experiments sit before probably putting it out there as well. So maybe there's just something with that. But I do agree that if you're a coach, I think having some sort of experimentation, or micro experiments even, I think it was framed. That's what ChatGPT told me.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it makes it fun again, too. That's another thing that so many coaches miss out on. I was going to make a video about this, is try new training methods, do experiments. Like, that's why I started really diving deep into Evo Sports System with Jay Schroeder, because honestly, I was getting bored. I was like, okay, how many times can I get on these goddamn balance pipes and work this slam? I've been doing this shit for 10 years. Like,
mhm.
and I feel like I've just extrapolated and dissected it to death, where I'm not learning anything now. Like, I feel like I've kind of plateaued on because Dr. Ida told me about like the ball work, like, hey, this is actually fascial mechanics we're trying to enhance more than just a muscle tendon system, and then that took me on a whole like rabbit hole of understanding this new layer of tissue and how it works, and trying to learn about it, trying to do new experiments. But then after a while, I was like, okay, like now what? Like, I'm going to keep doing more ball work. And then I got into extreme isometrics after I studied that Jay Schroeder, Adam Archuleta case, and I did a couple videos about it. It got really popular. So I really started studying the system and been experimenting with it. Now I got like a whole new world I can start exploring of, okay, what can we get out of this? What qualities could this help? And how can we take this one experiment and apply it in different ways to get certain qualities? Like, I don't just do things exactly how the textbook will say it. I'll do it how like the textbook or whatever information I have, like, hey, this is how you apply it. Like for the extreme ISOs, this is like my new experiment, where they say build up to like 3 minutes plus. And I'm like, okay, I've done ISOs for a really long time, but I've always done it in 3 sets of 10. Like, they call it the 3 position hold at 10 seconds a piece. You like each point of flexion, like 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds, right? It's 30 seconds of tension. Great results. Vertical jumps go up, force generation goes up, it builds armor. Like you say, I like that word though, building armor. That's actually exactly the right word to describe it. But I've never went into an ISO longer than that. And I first did my extreme ISO just sitting on my computer. I was actually waiting for Battlefield 6 to load up, because it was getting updated. So like, I play a lot of video games, so I'm doing my experiments too. I have a weird mind. And I remember holding it past 60 seconds and it just like freaking blew my mind. I'm like, whoa, like this is way more difficult. I started feeling all these weird reactions out of my compensating injuries that I've had for years. TFL, quadricep tendon sartorius, like started to burn out after 60 seconds, almost to the point where it's kind of painful. But then I noticed like a reduction in pain. I'm like, okay, so how else can we do this? Can I add sticks to this? What if I lighten the load and I go deeper into time? What if I do it without sticks and I don't assist and I just, like I'm trying to figure out like, how can we take this one modality and pull it apart and stretch it down to the physiological principles? How can we reapply this? What can we get out of this? How can we expand upon this idea? And that's why I think a lot of coaches, they kind of get stuck, even myself, dude, I've been stuck in the nervous system training like world, like the Marv Marinovich confirmation bias bubble for years. And after a while, it's like it makes you close-minded, and it makes your ego too dominant, right? You want to defend your team. You only want to get behind a certain flag, like whether it's functional patterns or whether it's CrossFit or whether, whatever the label is. And I also learned this from Nick. He always refreshed my memory. Did a couple of calls with him. He said, dude, it's so important to keep your eyes open. You never know what's out there. Run experiments, see, like try new things. And it makes it fun. It makes it interesting. It gets you thinking again. It gets you a new project to work on. Some stuff goes nowhere. Sometimes you do experiments, like, okay, this isn't really like, I don't see a really high return on investment. Like everything works, but some things work better faster than others, and that's what you want to prioritize. But some experiments, I'm trying to see how much physical therapy qualities you can get out of an extreme ISO without doing the traditional physical therapy movements. Who knows where this can go? So far, it seems kind of promising, but yeah, it just puts energy back into your mind on scientific method, on experimentation, and to get yourself to think outside of the box a little bit, which I've tried to encourage more coaches to start doing. And I think this is what's going to make the industry better, to kind of like break away from these identity systems and more into just looking at training as a whole, under, I guess, principles.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe in some ways, the Marinovich system with the barbells, it's in a way, it's almost like every action is going to have a reaction. Every push is going to have a pullback.
Mhm.
And in some ways, it's almost like just trying to break the identity of human performance with the barbell. I think the barbell is a really helpful tool, but I think, there's a deeper layer of the human being and the strength of the human being that can be released onto a barbell or a dynamic, super cat squat with a balance disc or whatever it is you're doing. And yeah, just to have no, uh, we all have our preferred methods, but no attachment that runs so far that it just is, that's your whole program. And um, with physical therapy, like you mentioned, I do think a lot of physical therapy settings, the thing is extreme isos are hard, but I think a lot of physical therapy clients would get to where they want a lot faster doing that stuff. But it's just one of those things where it shows that when you put the work in and you can harness your will into the thing you want, there's a very strong relationship there. And I had this thought the other day of another constraint for coaches. An experiment would actually be the experiment without methods, meaning every coach is doing the same methods for a period of time, but the constraint is how you actually coach. How do you talk to the athlete? How do you set goals for them? How do you set the environment? How do you
Mhm.
help them reflect on the session and all those things? And that's the experiment. But I think the thing I really like in Jay's system with the ISOs, at least, is that it's so simple that the constraint is that it's so simple. So it forces you to actually all the little things. You mentioned like the little muscles. Like it's like, well, how's my posture? How's my breathing? How's my body language? How's my perception of the discomfort in this? How's my connection with the muscles I'm looking to work? How is my feeling that this is going to get me where I want to go in my goal? And yeah, it's like this constraint that actually makes things extremely simple and almost a little, dumb would almost be like training dumb a little bit. And that's for this moment in time, that's actually okay. It's like a brute. It's like, hey, this is just inner human physiology at work and there's absolutely nothing fancy about it. And we're all on the same playing field here to some extent. I think that's almost beautiful with, you mentioned the pipes. I saw, like a Nick Kirsten video with I'm like, I didn't know you could even work a pipe that many ways, like with your feet. Like the mainline ones, I'm like, this is awesome. But eventually it's like, okay, this is almost becoming the circus, but it also is like super creative. I'm like blown away at the creativity they got here. But
Mhm.
it's like almost with some of that dynamic reactive stuff, if you just only do that, like you said, it can eventually become the circus
Yeah.
in a sense. And, at that point, it's like, okay, maybe this would be cool on social media, but it's probably not going to necessarily move the needle any farther outside of maybe an athlete that wants a little novelty. Hey, try this thing on the pipe, but you can't do that, versus those mainline real line adaptations that they could take in their sport.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and also when you add that creativity, it kind of gets to that circus level. It really helps break up the monotony of training. the monotony of like being an athlete. That's another thing. Being an athlete, that's why I quit, man. Being an athlete is not always, it's actually not fun. It's a hard life. It's
Yeah.
thousands of hours of doing the same thing over and over and over again, hoping for a different result. It borders on the line of insanity, and to come up with something a little newer, a little bit more creative, a little bit more stimulating, engaging for the athlete goes a long way for their mental health and for the mental health of their coaches. Now, that is a fine line to ride, though, because I have worked with some coaches where they just wanted to be creative and they wanted to be like avant garde and what's there's a word for a type of art where like they do like silliness, thinking that it's art. Like they'll like smear like mud all over them and say this is like a
Mm.
representation of the
Yeah, yeah.
ecosystem. I can't remember the word, but that you can fall into that trap a little bit where you just want to like get high on creativity, you know. But yeah, there are limiters, especially if you have to develop an athlete like work with an athlete long term, like 2+ years, like Jay Schroeder and Adam Archuleta or Nick Kirsten and Rafael dos Anjos. You're gonna want that creativity when you guys are like deep into, the career, 2+ years, 3+ years grinding away. You got to come up with new things to try to keep them stimulated, like unlike other industries or like in the sport, you always have a new challenge, a new athlete ahead of you, which kind of fuels that fire. But in the training, man, you know, you can only do so many freaking back squats and, pull ups until after a while, like I think that's what actually ruins careers more than anything is the preparation for the competition gets so unmotivating. They start neglecting it and you start seeing them fall off. The athlete kind of falls off, age starts creeping in. It's a real important layer that I don't think gets enough attention.
Yeah, I agree. And even that's why I think, like a super cat squat or an isokinetic or dynamic machine on like a balance disc. It's there's always something that's interesting to it.
Mhm.
Like even this little tweaks. Like I've seen like I think it was a sports science lab video with like it's like you just do a squat and you external rotation on this rep, internal rotation on this rep, and just simple explorations. Like it's not like why you're not like jumping and like switching legs in the air and trying to catch a balance disc, but just simple manipulations of rotations and pressure and feeling like the reactivity. I think that yeah, that reactive piece, I think athletes crave it. And I think really good athletes actually crave it even more. Um, and hopefully they're getting it when they're actually, they're going and playing and they're probably getting a lot of that just by playing and being awesome on the field. But I think they really appreciate it, in appropriate amounts in the gym. And I guess there's that spectrum though too, right? Like if you have too many degrees of freedom available, like there's too many joint motion possibilities, you can't apply enough force. And of course, if it's a pure isometric into a bar, you can apply all the force in the world. And so the question is, well, where do we want to sit on that? Or it strikes me kind of like moving and I like to do this a lot, is moving from a lot of degrees in exploration and reactivity into whatever the explosive thing of the day or the most forceful thing of the day is. Um, just quickly, I want to get to this before we close out, but
Sure.
I opened with this on the strength piece. Like the Marinoviches, they did strength. They just did it differently on the Supercats and things like that. Tell me how you approach strength, like strength qualities, mainline strength qualities in your version of the system and in your gym.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways you can develop what I call because if you I think my descriptor is correct. But technically strength is just your body just jolting your system with as much electricity as possible, right? I remember seeing this guy, he was like weightlifting and I think it was like a YouTube stunt and they put like those electrodes on him and he was trying to bench press and they cranked it up and he really like popped the bar off of him. And that was like, oh, that's what strength is. Like you're like it's electrical signal in your body. So when you look at strength as that, like a driving force of being able to produce force and not think of it as anything else, then you can kind of see that there's so many different ways to create force and strength into the body, create neurological drive. And some of the ways is why Marv started to veer away from the barbell system. And actually, he never really explained it super well. He just knew it didn't do something that helped him. There's a couple layers to this that I can try to break down. is when you're doing barbell strength, one, you're usually fixed in a couple positions because you have to balance this heavy ass thing on you, right? And it's kind of sketchy, especially if you're messing around with 1RMs and maximal. Like there's like a level of like, holy shit, I got to get this off or it's going to crush me, right? And so a lot of times an athlete will put so much intensity into the concentric portion of the lift because that's the part that they're trying to achieve, getting the bar up. And the eccentric portion doesn't really get as much intensity and focus. And so that pulls a lot of concentric, compressive contractions into the muscle tendon system, into the fascial system. And your nervous system and body will start adapting its tissue for that concentric drive, which of course you need. You know, you need eccentric and concentric to have a good amortization phase for good force production. But what happens is that you overemphasize, and Marv was going way too hard into 1RMs, way too hard into maximals. And he basically turned his suit of armor into like steel. He got rid of all the chain link mail that made it pliable and loose. He just made it heavier and heavier, you know, where he basically was he had like steel blocks on him. And so that diminishes your soft quality over time. Elasticity goes down, flexibility goes down, reactivity and skill acquisition start to break down at the expense of what the nervous system is trying to adapt to. It's just trying to adapt to the stress. And so how we tried to, and also the muscular equilibrium. You know, a lot of these movements tend to overemphasize on certain muscle groups more than others. And like say the quads can outdevelop the hamstrings and hips. You know, so that creates a dysfunction or the hips stay inactive. Like here's a crazy one. I was working with this NFL guy, lineman, defensive lineman. He's been doing strength training for years. You know, he's 7 years into the NFL. And I had him doing some of the ball work movements, some of the kickbacks, and his hamstrings could not handle it. And
Yeah,
so,
can you describe that real quick? Just that
yeah,
exact motion.
so he's doing different movements where he's like rolling a ball back with his legs, stretching one leg, making contact, a lot of eccentric force movements, a lot of reactive holds, like single leg hip bridges on the stability ball at different lengths.
Yeah.
And he said his hamstrings were freaking blowing up. He couldn't handle it the first time. And I was like, well, you've been deadlifting for like years. And he's like, I know. He's like, isn't that weird? So apparently you can have such dominant compensating muscle groups where certain muscle groups, even though they're targeted for that, they won't get the same amount of stress and stimulus. They'll get too much help from other primaries. So they'll get neglected. They'll kind of hide under the surface in the nervous system, you know, and they don't get the exposure to stimulus that you're looking for. Now, just to kind of like paint a picture for everyone on why Marv changed his strength training methodology because of these very reasons, because the dominant concentric adaptation and these other stabilizers and secondaries that don't quite activate to the intensity they should, and sometimes the primaries will do a majority of the work. So he started developing of other ways to create neurological drive and force production at different points of the force velocity curve in a way that's not going to have so many negative side effects, where it's not going to break down muscle tendon balance, agonist to antagonist muscle groups. And it's not going to make you too concentric dominant in your adaptations and you lose your soft qualities. And so he started using two primary tools. That was the isokinetic accelerator, which uses a flywheel resistance, kind of like the row machine. Right. And that creates a lot of neurological drive, but it only matches the force you're pushing into it. Right. And it doesn't create quite as much compressive forces. And also because you don't have a force vector pushing straight down on you, you're pushing up against something. Like if you ever felt the isokinetic accelerator, Joel?
I have flywheels, so
yeah,
maybe similar. Yeah.
Right. So it's like you can move it slowly and it doesn't feel like much resistance, but if you really drive into it, like it'll match your resistance.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So you can achieve maximal strength training qualities without the compressive side effects of the concentric portion of the lift and the load working against you. Right. Because you got to drive. So you can maintain a better muscle tendon balance. You can maintain better elasticity in the body, and you can drive the nervous system's force production to an even higher level without the risk of injuring an athlete. So there's that tool that they implemented. The other one is the super cat, where you can start doing a bunch of different strength training. You can actually hit every form of strength training on the force velocity curve. You can work speed all the way to 1 RM. Now, with maximal strength training, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can, you can simply just load like 60 to 80% of your 1 RM and do your reps, 8 to 10, whatever it is, not hitting a failure point. But the super cat doesn't quite put so much force onto the body because of the way the ergonomics of the arm is. It loads the shoulders, so it's less compressive on the spine, so the erectors don't take over all the tension, and it's more eccentric dominant. The way it's designed, the downwards force is always going to be greater than the upwards force, just by the way of I think it's like a second class lever or something like that.
Sure.
Now, another way you can do it, this is my favorite. This is why this tool really someone needs to buy this company. Someone needs to get this tool back onto the market, where you can actually achieve what I call a 1 RM isometric on the super cat, which you can't achieve with a barbell. So you have like overcoming isometrics and resisting isometrics. But the big limiter to overcoming ISO is the tool you use. You can use a trap bar, you can use a barbell, but you're limited to, say, your grip strength as you're trying to pull it up, right? If your grip can't handle it, you're never going to hit your 1 rep max. You're not going to reach your peak neurological drive. Or if it's on your back, like you got to try to like push through, it could feel super uncomfortable and awkward, which could limit the athlete's driving force. With the super cat, the way it's designed, the coach can literally push on the loading mechanism, which loading mechanism here is in the carriage, and it leverage pushes down on the athlete. And based on what the coach can feel through the machine, he can determine where the athlete is reaching their absolute limit on the isometric, whether it's an overcoming or resisting isometric. And I call that a one rep max isometric, because you're peaking the athlete's strength capacity. Like if you go any harder, it's going to crumble them. So there's that. So you can really push the isometric force and the isometric force production to a way more insane level. Now, Nick Kersen has been experimenting with unloaded maximal strength training using a lot of resistance bands on the super cat, because he's been really deep into like resistance bands, studying how much more that forces the nervous system to really produce a higher amount of force. And as you pull higher against the band, the resistance starts matching you the higher it goes. And so he's been really pushing a lot of maximal strength training ideas with the super cat with a shit ton of resistance bands on it. So there's all sorts of ways you can work neurological drive with Marinovich's style of nervous system training. The tools have changed because we want to lean more into the soft qualities. We want to lean away from some of the negative side effects that come with the barbell maximum style of strength training.
Yeah. I look at it on 2 levels. One is just the raw stimulus value. And it's funny because people talk about barbells. It's like, oh, it's more you get more hormonal release or something. And actually, it's funny. I remember I was doing a lot of research for that item when I was writing Speed Strength. 2018 came out, and it's funny because that hormonal boost is less than what you think it is, and it's also very transient. I do think there's something there, but I think it's more than just hormones. Maybe in the same way of saying, oh, this is the nervous system, or this is fascia, or this is this or that. It's more than hormones. Like I just think about, okay, if you register the state of your whole system when you're about to hit a heavy clean or squat or something, what does that feel like? Take note. Okay, now we're going to replace that with something else that might be more dialed into the foot, ankle, hip chain. Okay, are you getting it? Are you excited about this? Do you feel somewhat similar after you do this from an entire perspective in terms of that stimulation and activation? And I think that's a way of looking at it. But then I think about, I saw a lot of stuff where like athletes would be on their back and they're just pressing into the supercat lever with a foot or an ankle. And I think about what you said about the foot, and like there's that bottom up, like it's the limiting factor. It's like a dance between putting force through the ankle, even through the toes, across the foot, into a lever arm. And there's something that's about that's that that bottom up stimulus, I could see, I've never done it, but I could just see it being something that carries a lot of, like you said, electrical activation, but then it's also very directed to the exact output. There's not much force that's going into the back per se. And the last thing I'll just mention too, and I really noticed this spending time at Hammer Strength. They're one of their HQ or their factory HQ up in Minneapolis, and everything runs on like an arc, or most things run on some sort of arc. And that's the thing with like nature. Nature is not a straight line, and like if it's so different, like even a pendulum squat versus a Smith machine, it's so different. And like a super cat or a Kaiser jumper, I think something about that too is like the arc of movement is just more ergonomic. There's something with the body that's just right and good. And people like talk crap about machines, but I'm like, a machine that can tie you into that arc, man, like that's where it's at. I think there's so much good that comes out of that.
Yeah. Well, check this out. So when it comes to increases, and this is another thing that was a big paradigm shifter. Same NFL guy, working with the same NFL player. We did very little strength training, within the program, because he's been doing weightlifting for like 30 plus years, right? Like, what more can we get out of this? Like, you kind of maxed out what your strength to size ratio can hit with these tools. When we started doing the ball work training and reactive isometrics more, and started developing his intramuscular strength, but also balancing out some of these other chains, like his shoulder girdle, like the way his lat feeds into his scapula, the way his pectoral minor can activate with his pectoral major, right? Without doing any maximal strength training for weeks. He went back to test his maximal strength training, his 1RM. All his 1RMs went up.
That's awesome.
His deadlift went up, his trap bar lift went up, his pull-ups, and his bench press. We never touched any of those tools. It's because his body wasn't using all the tissue that it could be using. The intramuscular strength and the muscle sequencing, how the muscle will sequence how the body will sequence the muscles together to produce the proper amount of force for whatever he's doing. So this is like, and a lot of people worry about that when you start doing these other forms of strength training, this ball work or something like that. A lot of people feel like they're going to get weaker. But the exact opposite happens, because now you can produce strength more efficiently. And if people want an idea of how, when something is working deficiently, can actually affect the body, stub your pinky toe and try walking around. Your whole body falls apart, right? From that one little toe. Your whole, limping, your shoulders kind of get weird, like you don't want to move. It completely messes with your whole ability to do anything. So when you can make these small changes in your body, get the shoulder blades to start sliding across the ribs better, get the hamstrings to actually fire up, with the quads instead of the quads and maybe the glute medius doing all the work, but you get the hamstrings and glute max to start kicking in better. All of a sudden, all your 1RMs will start going up. And it's a crazy paradigm shift for people to go through. But I remember when he went through that, he's like, dude, I don't know how you did this, but everything is stronger and everything actually hurts less doing it. There's a little anecdotal things for the viewers to kind of think about.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of even something as simple as like the Soviets with I think it was javelin throwers or a javelin thrower case set where they stopped doing weights for a block and just did depth jumps and plyos as the special strength. Sure, still sprinting and throwing javelin, but come back to squats better. And I always found that too. For me, it was those like high end depth jumps and things. And I mentioned even the way my system felt stimulated after a squat. I'd say depth jumps even more. Like I could go after a set of depth jumps, and if I go up to grab the rim, it's just like this, just getting kicked off the ground. And you think about what your system, the overload of this system. For me, that was all my strengths too. Like that was Joel's strengths that to light up my nervous system. And I think it's good, just to find different ways to do it. It strikes me that the strength machines within the Marinovich system are even safer ways that are probably more applicable for more people. I mean, I think depth jumps are great, but they are on the high end. I just want to touch on this just real quick. You mentioned like the flywheel type thing, and Paul Cater, my buddy, he's been on this show a few times. He just ran an experiment where he was doing all strength with flywheel, or mostly a lot of his lower body mainline strength was flywheel squats and those things. And goes back to do a trap bar deadlift test and is as strong as basically his top line is, like having neglected the trap bar for a very long time. So it's like to go and do this. And I almost look at flywheel as almost a slow strength. It can be fast, like if you have a light wheel, just flying through it, but it's reactive. Like you're always kind of trying to be one with the where the resistance is versus these points of passive just compression, just kind of like hitting you down from the top like your spine. So yeah, I just think that the like you mentioned, exploration, the willingness to explore those different resistance and then come back to whatever if you have a favorite strength test, do an alternative, then come back to it. That's kind of what I'm doing with sandbags right now. Even like, hey, I don't have a bench press in my garage, so my training partner and I were doing sandbag presses, but the partner resists you on the way down. So it's like it's reactive, and it's also like the human piece, like just the human, the coach or the partner feeling
Oh yeah.
what the person can give. You start to improve your skill of that thing. That's such an important quality. Again, we don't teach that in school at all. That was nowhere on my radar at all. But it's like that skill is really important to feel, like you mentioned, the supercat, feeling where the athlete can't handle it. How do I give them the best experience as a partner here? Like that's coaching massively, a great piece of coaching.
Yeah. Manual muscle resistance, huge. That's another thing. Nick Kirsten taught me this. Totally huge paradigm shifter. There's no strength machine that's better than your own hands.
Mm.
He taught me so many different ways to train the body with just using a towel and the strength of my arms. I was like, how do we do this? What machine can help with this? He's like, fucking machine. He's like, watch this shit. And he grabbed a towel, put it around the ankle, and he got a guy in a position, started training his hip flexor. He's like, look, it's like I can totally match the perfect amount of resistance he needs based on how it feels for me. And I was like, of course. Like, why didn't I just think of that? You just need a towel. I'm like, you just put your hand. He's like, just put your hand against it. Now resist against my hand with the ankle. It's like, bam, right there. Save yourself $5,000. And I'm like, okay. But Joel, you got to come by, man. You got to come over to my garage. You got to get on some of these supercat stuff, man. I got like 3 of them. If you want to, you should come to the garage and we got to do some experiments, man. We got to try some stuff. I got to show you some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't been on a supercat in a very long time. I would love to try that again. And I think even, before all the machines come in, that basic human is the original machine of resistance. I've been doing a lot of rope partner stuff in addition to the towel. So good. Even just biceps and triceps in different speeds. Single arm, there's a lot of really cool things you learn in there. And the way you feel the next day too. And even athletically, it's different. So awesome stuff. Hey, I know we've been going for a while. Quintin, thanks for being on. I know a lot of people are probably familiar with your social media channels, but where can people learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, just check me out on Instagram at Quintin.Torres36, Quintin with 2 I's. Feel free to check out my videos. I'm dropping all sorts of free training methods, explanations on different training protocols, all sorts of stuff. My goal of my social media is try to offer as much value as possible for free so you guys can come up with better training methods to help reach your goals, get more athletes where they want to be.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was great talking.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This was fun. Anytime you want me to come back on, I like to talk.
Likewise.